In this corner, the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Hush 2-pack Hush. And in this corner, my very first Mafex. Did I already review this figure? Yes. Is it worth looking at again? Oh yeah. This is one versus you do not want to miss. Welcome to 5 Points of Articulation, where I review action figures and then articulate 5 points to help you decide if you want to add that figure to your collection. The 5 points I discuss are packaging, presentation, posability, playability, and price. I'm Jason, and if you enjoy my content, please like, share, subscribe, do all the YouTube rigmarole. Starting off with the packaging, and I did go over the DC Multiverse box already, but it's still important to revisit it. Name and logo down here, name on the side, UPC for those who want it, and a big boring digital render on the back. This was even more disappointing because a really cool graveyard image had already been solicited. Why they went with less when more was available is anybody's guess. Moving on to Mafex, and it's also a big window box, but very, very different. Relatively speaking, the window's a bit smaller. This is to accommodate the logo on the side. Nice picture of Hush down here. Interesting that it specifies that this is the Hush version Hush. Kinda makes me wonder if they're planning any other versions. All of our logos down here. Logo in a completely different product shot on one side. Still another one on the top. Yet another one on the other side. Legal on the bottom. This includes Medicom's non-reproducible foil sticker to let you know this is the genuine article. And all sorts of goodies on the back. There's a simple classiness to this that I'm really digging. I also really like all the product shots, and also the showcase of all the different accessories. If domestic action figure boxes were this thorough, it would probably be a lot harder for people to swap. Coming as a surprise to absolutely no one, for packaging, this round goes to Mafex. Moving on to presentation and Mafex. Okay, I think we all know where this round is going to go, but just like a good mystery, the journey is more important than the ending. First things first, and the Mafex figure stands at 6 1/4 inches, and the McFarlane one stands at 7 on the dot. From the top, and both figures seem similar. Bandaged heads angrily baring their teeth, each one featuring painted details to bring out the texture. Zooming on out though, and we can see just how wildly different these two figures are. The Mafex figure painstakingly recreates all the lines and padding and pouches of the comic book costume. McFarlane, however, covered it all up with a coat. It's worth pointing out that there were scenes in the comic where he did wear the coat closed, but generally speaking, this was his standard look and also what comes to mind if you mention Hush. There's one tiny paint fleck on mine, but otherwise this has been fantastically painted. The red piping is crisp and vibrant, as are all the yellow latches. Again, we see more of that great detailing on the belt and pouches. They even painted the line work under the coat, even though you were surely never going to see it. While we're back here, you'll notice a bit of shading in the coat, as well as some nice paint work on the knee pads and shin guards, and also the straps of his boots. Speaking of his boots, the treads have been sculpted, and the soles have been painted gray. Unfortunately, there aren't any peg holes. From a display standpoint, that is one thing that McFarlane has going for it. McFarlane also sculpted a lot of nice texture on the coat. Peering under that coat, the legs have been pretty nicely sculpted, but unfortunately, absolutely no paint detailing underneath. In McFarlane's defense, DC Direct kept the boots black also, but it was still a separate coat of paint. Let's not mince words. This was the cheapest possible way for McFarlane to make this figure. In terms of sculpted and painted detail, Hush should have felt like a combination of Dark Detective Batman and Godspeed. Instead, McFarlane took one of the coolest Batman villain designs and covered him up with a trench coat like a flasher in Central Park. Mafex, on the other hand, lovingly captured every pocket, seam, and pouch. On the other hand, is this level of painted detail something that McFarlane is even capable of? Of course it is. We've seen them do it plenty of times before. This, unfortunately, was a choice, and this is a work of art. For presentation, this round goes to Mafex. Moving on to posability, and this category might surprise you. From the top, and both of their heads are on dumbbell joints. The difference is that Mafex has a tiny little notch pointing backwards to give him even more range. Thanks to that notch, he can definitely look up a lot more than McFarlane, but McFarlane can definitely look more down. Probably because he's hanging his head in shame. Fairly equal amount of tilt, and all the way around. It's worth noting that Mafex has an additional ball joint at the base of the neck. It does make the movement a bit more natural, but in this case it doesn't seem to really translate to more range. Moving on down, and both figures have very similar range in their swivel hinge shoulders. Do be warned though that the Mafex one really likes to pop out. Traveling down the arm, and McFarlane has a bicep swivel. Mafex, however, does not. That said, both figures have double jointed elbows, but McFarlane has the superior range. They even have matching wrist balls which work very similarly. Also, seeing them side by side really highlights just how small the McFarlane hands are. Either way, they can both swivel and hinge, shifting to the torso, and that's where we're going to see the biggest difference. The Mafex figure has a diaphragm joint and a dumbbell waist. Honestly, not that dissimilar from a typical McFarlane figure, but for the Hush figure, McFarlane chose to go a different route. Peeking under the coat, we can see that he does technically have a diaphragm and a dumbbell. If you can't tell where the diaphragm is, there's an arrow pointing to it. Also, can I just say how much I love the laziness of not even continuing the stripes past where you would see it? Covering up that diaphragm is a thick rubber overlay which surely hinders articulation. Right? Not so fast. Both figures can hunch forward this far, and they can arch back this far. They can also tilt this far, which is about even, and both of them can twist. But then we get to the lower extremities. Both figures have ball-jointed hips. The difference is that Hush can also drop down. That allows him to kick this far and split this far. He, of course, is hindered by the bottom of his coat. McFarlane, however, can kick forward this far and split this far. In other words, it actually has a better range than Mafex. Both figures can twist at the hip, both have double jointed knees, but again, McFarlane does have the better range. They both have toe articulation, but again, McFarlane more so. And they both have very similar ankle balls that can swivel, hinge, and pivot. Never having had a Mafex figure before, I am blown away by the engineering and the smoothness of the articulation. That said, this experience has given me a newfound appreciation for McFarlane Toys, particularly with posability. Not only does it feel like they're trying to emulate import quality, but the range was even better. For posability, this round goes to McFarlane. Moving on to playability, and I can't imagine how this round is going to go. First things first, McFarlane comes with a trading card and a figure stand. Pause here if you want to read it. He also comes with a shovel. The dirt unfortunately hasn't been painted. Since it's a 2-pack, he can technically use Batman's batarangs. And I guess you could consider Batman an accessory to murder! See, here's the gravestone right there. All joking aside, they do come with this cemetery base. The sculpted detail is pretty good, but it does lack in the paint department. Mafex also comes with a stand, and I've been wanting one of these for a very long time. To be honest, I thought it was going to be bigger. Still, you have 3 different options for where to peg it, and a couple of joints. Hush also comes with a staggering amount of accessories. Let's start with the heads. In addition to this more toothsome version, he also has a closed mouth option. He also has an unmasked version. Well, not unmasked. Unbandaged. The whole point of the story was gaslighting Batman to make him think that Jason Todd had returned from the grave for revenge. This was before the Red Hood storyline that kinda did that. To that end, and Hush has a couple of other swappable parts to help that transformation. First of all, there's the H on his chest. That comes out like so, and in its place you can peg in this R. You can also pull his lower extremities off and switch out the belt. Evil Robin transformation complete. He also comes with 5 additional pairs of hands. Not only that, but each pair of hands also has its own little stand. Of course, he comes preloaded with these fists. He's also got a pair of hands holding some batarangs. These have been pre-sculpted, so no worry about dropping them. He's also got a pair of jazz hands, a pair of relaxed hands, a pair of accessory holding hands, and a pair of trigger hands. Shockingly, he even comes with a pair of guns. Considering Warner Brothers' moratorium on guns with action figures, it would seem that Hush came out just in time. He also comes with a couple of coins which have got to be the most carpet goblin-y things I have ever seen. He also comes with the world's smallest batarang. But playability is more than just accessories, it's also about how well your figures play with others. First things first, and here we have Hush himself. This one is by DC Direct. Looking here, and we can see the only 3 6 to 7 inch comic-style Hush figures ever made. Moving on to Batman, and here we have the S3 sculpt by Mattel. Despite some creative liberties, this is very close to the blue and gray version of Batman as he appeared in the Hush comic. And even he got treads. Jumping ahead, and here we have the DC Universe Classics version by Mattel. I still contend that this is one of the best Batman figures ever made, and just because I very seldom get to bust him out, here we have the Arkham Asylum version by Mattel. And while we're on that subject, here we have the DC Direct version. And speaking of DC Direct / DC Collectibles, here we have the Designer Series Grey Capullo version. He's a hair too big for Mafex on your shelf, but for photography purposes, you could definitely fudge it with perspective. Here we have DC Icons Batman, and I think he scales great with Mafex. And then moving on up, and here we have DC Essentials. This figure scales pretty well with the McFarlane one. And speaking of McFarlane, here we have Detective Comics 1000 from DC Multiverse. This figure and Hush scale really well. Here we have DC Rebirth. It's a hair on the short side, but I think it works pretty well with the McFarlane Hush. And then lastly, here we have my custom Hush Batman that I showed off in my previous video. For other members of the Bat family, and here we have the 2003 Tim Drake Robin by Mattel. Definitely scales well with Mafex. And then here we have Nightwing. This figure's from the Hush collection by DC Direct, and here we have DC Essentials. There is a Mafex version of this coming out, and I will admit I am pretty sorely tempted. Here we have the DC Designer Series Catwoman. I am including her in the Bat family because that's the story where their romance really started to pick up. Mafex did make a Catwoman, and I am very unhappy that I missed out on her. For the other hero who featured prominently in Hush, here we have Superman. This is one of the first 6-inch scale Mattel Supermans. And then here we have DC Universe Classics. Here we have the history of the DC Universe by DC Direct. Aside from some of the joints and how back-heavy he is, this is one of my favorite Superman figures. Next up, we've got DC Icons. He seems a bit too small. Here we have DC Essentials, which scales much better with the McFarlane. And here we have Action Comics 1000 by McFarlane. Shifting over to some villains, and here we have the Joker. This one is from DC Universe Classics and scales really well with Hush. Here we have Batman and Son by DC Direct. And here we have Mike Kitbash using Death of the Family and the Three Jokers clown. Of course, where there's Joker, there is Harley Quinn. Here we have the DC Universe Classics version, and here we have DC Essentials. Mafex is making one, and you'll be happy to know that I pre-ordered her too. Here we have the DC Direct version of Poison Ivy. Definitely need a new version of her. And for a version that I much prefer, here's the Secret Files version by DC Direct. Here we have the DC Direct version of Scarecrow, and here we have Killer Croc. Personally, I think that this one can work with either. If you've read Hush, you'd know there's a pretty big twist involving Clayface. Here they are with the DC Superheroes version by Mattel, and here they are with the DC Multiverse version by McFarlane. For one final Fiend, here they are with the Riddler. For a relative scale comparison, here they are with Pizza Spidey and the Spectacular Spider-Man, and as always, here they are with Stealth Iron Man. With so many different accessories, alternate looks, and figures you can scale them with, this one really is no contest. For playability, this round goes to Mafex. This leaves us with nothing left to discuss but the price, and you can probably figure out where this round is going to go to. The Mafex figure is jam-packed with value. Again, just the alternate looks alone. But that premium import quality cost a premium $92 on Amazon. Is it worth it? Oh yeah, every penny. But if all you want is a simple Hush action figure, $40 for this 2-pack isn't bad. In fact, you could get a single carded version with a different head for only $20. For price, this round goes to McFarlane, but the battle goes to Mafex, 3-2. For more Hush content, check out my original review of the Batman Hush 2-pack, or check out this customizing tutorial where I took that Batman and upgraded it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again real soon, but until then, play nice and have fun.